What if thunder wasn't just a sound, but a divine judgment? What if every rumble from the sky wasn't just a passing storm, but the voice of a god, a celestial decree echoing across the earth? In the heart of southeastern Nigeria, among the Igbo people, there exists such a belief of a thunderous force of justice known as Amadioha. To many, he is a myth, but to those who still whisper his name, Amadioha is power. Amadioha is law. Amadioha is truth. He isn't just the god of thunder, he is the embodiment of divine justice. Unlike the more widely commercialized gods of the West, like Thor with his hammer or Zeus with his lightning bolts, Amadioha has no blockbuster film franchise or comic book line. But within the oral traditions of the Igbo, his legacy is deeply carved, etched not in pages but in fear, reverence, and the moral codes of an entire civilization. He was not merely worshipped, he was obeyed, and his wrath was swift and precise. Who is Amadioha? That's the question that will lead us into an ancient world where morality wasn't policed by governments or institutions, but by the skies themselves. In Igbo cosmology, Amadioha is more than a deity. He is a principle, an unyielding force of cosmic balance. While the supreme god Chukwu created the universe, it was Amadioha who ensured that justice ran through its veins. His thunder was a verdict, his lightning a sentence, and no one, not king nor peasant, could escape it. Why is he feared? Because in the stories passed down through generations, Amadioha's justice is absolute. He is not a god that begs or pleads or forgives easily. Those who lie under oath in his name are said to meet terrifying ends. Those who defy truth invite calamity. His presence wasn't always seen, but always felt, especially when thunder cracked without warning, or when a village elder invoked his name in solemn silence. Is he still worshipped today? In parts of Igbo land, yes, though colonialism and Christianity reshaped much of the spiritual landscape, pockets of traditional belief remain. And in those sacred groves and village altars, Amadioha still reigns, not as a relic of the past, but as a living force, a god whose voice is thunder and whose justice strikes like lightning. He is the storm you don't see coming, the roar in the clouds reminding mankind that truth still has a guardian. Long before the arrival of colonial powers and foreign religions, the Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria worshipped a complex pantheon of deities, each governing different aspects of life, nature, and society. At the center of this spiritual constellation was Amadioha, the god of thunder, justice, and moral truth. His name, often whispered with reverence and fear, translates to man of the people or the will of the people, a divine reflection of communal judgment and ethical order. Unlike gods who ruled through brute power or vanity, Amadioha's authority was rooted in righteousness and balance. He was not just a mythological figure, he was the breath behind the moral spine of a people. In Igbo cosmology, Amadioha is not a standalone figure, but one that functions in harmony with other deities, under the supreme god, Chukwu. While Chukwu is the distant creator, formless and unreachable, Amadioha is present and direct, the active force that intervenes in human affairs. When injustice festers, it is Amadioha who strikes. When lies are told under oath, it is he who brings retribution. In many communities, disputes weren't settled by secular courts, but by invoking the judgment of Amadioha. His name carried weight, and his decisions were feared more than any human judge. Despite being a thunder god, Amadioha's identity goes far beyond elemental power. He was believed to manifest through lightning and thunder, not as displays of chaos, but as acts of judgment. A thunderclap after a contested oath was not taken lightly. It was considered a divine verdict. If lightning struck someone's property after they committed a moral offense, it was not seen as coincidence but divine consequence. Amadioha's justice is not subtle, it is loud, it is direct, and it leaves no room for interpretation. Interestingly, Amadioha is often compared to Shango, the Yoruba god of thunder, or even Thor and Zeus in Western traditions. But unlike these deities who are often associated with war and dominance, Amadioha's essence is rooted in communal ethics and truth. He does not thrive on conquest, but on maintaining cosmic and societal balance. His power is not an invitation to war, but a warning against moral decay. He does not choose sides based on strength, but on righteousness. Temples and shrines dedicated to Amadioha often stood in sacred groves, surrounded by trees considered untouchable by man. Offerings were made, usually involving white rams, a symbol of purity and truth. His sacred color is white, signifying transparency and justice. No lies could stand under his gaze. Among the Igbo, to call upon Amadioha in deceit was not just dangerous, it was suicidal. He was not a distant god one prayed to in times of need. He was a constant force, watching, weighing, waiting. Amadioha's domain was the soul of society itself, its values, its moral compass, its collective sense of justice. In him, the natural and spiritual worlds were aligned, and to defy him was to break harmony with both earth and the divine. Even kings feared invoking his name carelessly, for he answered not to thrones, but to truth. This universal moral authority made him not just a god of a people, but a god of principle. And so his presence lingers, even in modern times, spoken in hushed voices, remembered in rituals, referenced when justice is sought outside the courts. Amadioha is not a forgotten relic of a dead religion. He is a force that transcends time, a symbol that justice is not a human invention, but a divine expectation. To understand him is to understand the weight of truth in Igbo society and the ancient belief that thunder itself can speak right from wrong. His identity, layered and enduring, continues to echo wherever justice is valued and truth is sacred. In every culture, gods are given signs, colors, animals, elements to help mortals grasp their power. For Amadioha, the symbolism is both beautiful and terrifying. His element is thunder, not just as a natural force, but as a divine voice, sudden, unrelenting, and impossible to ignore. To hear thunder roll across the sky was to be reminded that truth walks among men, and justice is never asleep. Thunder wasn't random, it was a language, and those who listened knew when it was speaking to them. The ram is Amadioha's sacred animal, not just for its strength, but for its symbolism of sacrifice and purity. In rituals, white rams were offered to him, not only because of their rarity, but because the color white represented truth, justice, and moral clarity. Unlike the gods who thrived in chaos, Amadioha's power came from precision. Every symbol associated with him carried weight. Every color, every sound, every animal meant something deeper. White is his color, not because of purity in the Western sense, but because in Igbo tradition, white represents moral transparency. A person dressed in white approaching an Amadioha shrine did so as a sign they had nothing to hide. If they lied, they would not leave untouched. It was said that one could not wear white before Amadioha and tell a falsehood without consequence. His gaze, though unseen, could burn through deception. His days were sacred. There were particular market days, like Nkwo and Ika, when the air felt heavy, when ceremonies would be held to honor him, and when no false oaths dared be sworn. During these days, offerings were made in sacred groves where Amadioha was believed to reside. These groves were places of intense spiritual activity. They were silent, not because of emptiness, but because everyone knew the gods were listening. Amadioha's symbols were not only used in worship, but in justice. Disputes brought before elders were sometimes taken to his shrine. A symbolic staff or object would be laid between the parties, and they would be asked to swear their truth in his name. This was more than ritual. It was binding, feared, and absolute. It was said that even the most hardened liar would tremble before making such an oath. Even storms were part of his symbolism. When dark clouds gathered suddenly or lightning struck a tree in a village, people paused. They didn't just see weather, they saw a message, warning, or judgment. Natural phenomena were sacred signs. The earth under thunder's roar belonged to Amadioha in that moment. What makes Amadioha's symbolism even more compelling is its moral clarity. He is not cloaked in riddles or hidden in allegories. His signs are as loud and visible as his power: thunder, light, white, the ram, the oath, the strike. In a world where many deities are wrapped in metaphor, Amadioha's language is unmistakable. Be truthful, be just, or be ready. Amadioha's justice is not the kind found in courtrooms or written in law books. His justice is elemental, instinctive, and immediate. It does not wait for bureaucracy or negotiation. It strikes like thunder with force and finality. Among the Igbo, his reputation as a god of justice wasn't just symbolic, it was lived. When someone swore falsely by his name, they were believed to have signed a contract with death. And in many stories, death came, swiftly without warning and with the roar of the skies. There are tales of villagers who stole from the community or betrayed kin, only to be found lifeless after a sudden lightning storm. No one needed an explanation. They would say, "Amadioha has spoken." This wasn't superstition. It was a sacred understanding woven into the cultural DNA of the people. Amadioha didn't just punish individuals, he upheld collective order. To act immorally wasn't only a personal failure, it was an offense against the cosmic balance. Justice under Amadioha was spiritual but deeply social. His shrines often acted as courts, especially in times when the colonial legal systems were either absent or mistrusted. When two parties could not agree, they would take their dispute to Amadioha's priests. There, under the weight of the god's presence, they would swear to tell the truth. If one lied, it was believed they had invited divine judgment, not just on themselves, but on their family line. The threat of his wrath wasn't just about fear, it was about accountability. Amadioha held people to their word, and in doing so, he upheld the very essence of truth. In one tale, a man falsely accused a neighbor of theft to gain land. He swore by Amadioha. Days later, lightning struck his yam barn, setting it ablaze in front of the whole village. No one needed to investigate. The liar fell to his knees, confessing, as thunder rumbled in the background. His punishment was not exile or prison, it was divine exposure. Justice by Amadioha's hand was a spectacle meant to correct and warn. But his power wasn't just in punishment, it was also in prevention. The fear of his judgment kept many from wrongdoing. Children were taught not to lie because Amadioha sees all. Elders reminded people that every word spoken in deceit is heard by the sky. This created a spiritual atmosphere where truth was sacred and morality had teeth. Amadioha's power could also be invoked for protection. People prayed for him to strike down liars, to punish oppressors, to reveal hidden truths. His thunder was both sword and shield. In some villages, people would bury sacred objects dedicated to him near their homes to guard against thieves and evil. The belief was that if someone wronged you, Amadioha would not sleep until the balance was restored. He was not cruel, but he was uncompromising. He did not take pleasure in destruction, but he would not allow injustice to flourish. Unlike some deities who might be bribed with endless offerings, Amadioha was said to respond only to righteousness. A priest could speak his name, but if the cause was corrupt, the god would remain silent. His justice could not be bought, it had to be earned. To defy Amadioha was to defy truth itself. And in a culture where truth was the foundation of harmony, such defiance brought chaos. That is why Amadioha was not just worshipped, he was feared, he was respected. He was the thunder that reminded all of a higher law, the lightning that cut through lies, and the voice that echoed long after the skies cleared. Even in a world reshaped by colonialism, Christianity, and modern legal systems, the legacy of Amadioha refuses to fade. His presence continues to echo not just in sacred groves or ancient shrines, but in language, customs, and the collective conscience of the Igbo people. To understand Amadioha is to understand how a society rooted its sense of morality in forces far greater than man-made rules. He wasn't just a figure of the past, he remains a moral symbol of what justice should look like when stripped of corruption and pride. Across generations, Amadioha has remained embedded in cultural expressions. He is referenced in folk tales where truth always wins, in parables told to children to instill a sense of honesty, and in warnings whispered when someone seems too willing to bend the truth. Even in music, literature, and local idioms, Amadioha represents the universal idea that no wrongdoing goes unseen and no lie lasts forever. When someone says, "May Amadioha judge between us," they aren't invoking nostalgia, they're calling on an eternal standard. In traditional courts and dispute resolution rituals, echoes of Amadioha's justice still hold sway. In rural areas of Igbo land, elders sometimes settle conflicts with invocations of his name. The accused might be asked to make declarations near sacred symbols, not just as tradition, but as a test of conscience. The fear that Amadioha may still strike isn't theatrical. It's deeply internalized. Even among those who no longer actively worship, the psychological and cultural weight of his name endures. Modern spirituality has also witnessed a quiet revival of interest in indigenous African belief systems. Amid a global search for identity and roots, many young Africans are reconnecting with the gods of their ancestors. For some, this has meant returning to the worship of Amadioha, not as an act of rebellion against Christianity or Islam, but as an affirmation of cultural dignity and spiritual sovereignty. In this movement, Amadioha's image has evolved from a feared enforcer to a symbol of justice, resistance, and ancestral pride. Social commentary also finds a place for Amadioha. In a time where justice often feels elusive and institutions compromised, people sometimes reference Amadioha in public discourse, especially on social media. A trending tweet might read, "If only Amadioha still struck liars," or "We need Amadioha in our government." These are not literal cries for divine lightning. They are expressions of deep frustration with the systems of power and a longing for the clarity and fairness that his judgment represented. His iconography has even begun to inspire new generations of creatives. Visual artists depict him with striking white garments and thunder in his eyes. Poets describe his justice like a blade of lightning. Filmmakers and novelists are slowly returning to the old gods, not as mythological artifacts, but as vital threads of African storytelling. Amadioha is no longer relegated to oral histories. He's re-emerging as a character in the wider conversation about who we are and who we want to be. But perhaps the most powerful influence Amadioha still holds is in the heart. That inner voice that stirs when we consider a lie when we hide a truth or when we see injustice and remain silent. He lives in that moment of choice. The fear may no longer be of thunderbolts, but the moral weight of his legacy remains. In every culture, justice is only as strong as the people's belief in it. Among the Igbo, that belief was once thunder, and for many, it still is. Amadioha is more than a god of thunder. He is the ancient echo of a people's conscience, the sky-born judge whose voice was lightning and whose silence was verdict. To the Igbo, he wasn't some distant myth or story to entertain children. He was present, living, feared, and revered. In a world before legal contracts and digital footprints, his was the justice that mattered most. Because when Amadioha judged, no appeal could be made. His justice didn't come through compromise. It came through truth. Even now, long after the colonial erasure of indigenous belief systems, his name lingers, not just in rituals or groves, but in language, memory, and fear. The fear of doing wrong, the fear of losing one's honor, the belief that somewhere above, justice still watches. In rediscovering Amadioha, we rediscover the idea that justice is sacred, that it must be defended not just with laws, but with values. In every thunderclap, in every cry for fairness, his spirit survives. If Amadioha struck your curiosity, strike that like button. Subscribe for more stories of gods, truth, and ancient power, and share this video to keep the legend alive.